some years ago. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. We're back for another Monday with my father, Dr. Wallach. So Doc Monday. Gosh, you know, we're so many topics that I want to talk about, and it's always interesting trying to narrow it down to one topic. And with everything going on in today's crazy world, you know, here we are on another Monday. It's kind of partly sunny out, and here in Southern California. Hopefully everybody is doing well and staying safe and all that good stuff. But we narrowed down a topic, I think, in really that not only sums it up, but is overall encompassing. So it's broad but narrow. So what I want to talk about is why you've done what you've done for 50 plus years. I know where it all began because we've talked about that with the eyelid twitching and the nutrients and things, and so much throughout your, I guess you could call it a career, but it's more than that. Throughout your mission to educate everybody, the world, on the benefits of nutrients and supplementation and a better diet and bad foods and good foods and things like that. And growing up around you, you had a very traditional educational background. So I know you're looking at me funny because you're like, how have I had a traditional education? Well, the traditional education, and this is what just I think confuses people when they first meet you from an academic standpoint, because they think you're just some crazy, as Sanjeev used the word in the documentary The Audacity of Health, heretic. You're a heretic and some nut talking about supplementation and vitamins and crazy person. But the reality is you have 2 degrees from the University of Missouri, very traditional degrees, by the way. So a BS in agriculture with an emphasis on soil science, taught by none other than Dr. William Albrecht, who is world famous to this day for his discoveries around soil science and nutrients in agriculture. So you had a mentor in Dr. Albrecht, and then you have a degree in veterinary medicine from the University of Missouri, which of your veterinary class, there were, I think, only 23 or 28 students accepted. It's super, super hard to get in. And the reality is the curriculum is taught by the same professors that teach the same chemistry classes, the same biochemistry, the same physiology, the same biochem and all of that stuff to students that go on to become medical doctors. It's the same curriculum, same classes, same professors, same science. And so those are very traditional educational background that you have. So you were on a very traditional path initially in terms of education and science, and then you went on to University of Iowa and became a graduate student in comparative pathology of humans and animals, which was a little bit unique, but it was still very traditional. University of Iowa, very sciencey. Iowa State, very sciencey. And so you got a really initial deep dive into human anatomy. And I personally have, just sat there in awe while you've spoken the very high level scientific lingo with very high level scientists, including Dr. Schrauzer, among others. And when you're talking about human anatomy with, kind of typical medical doctors, they're amazed at just your knowledge and awareness of a very traditional sort of understanding of this kind of core science around human anatomy, for instance, even though your background is soil science and veterinary medicine, because you have all of this education that just surprises them that they don't realize you have. And so, I mean, you've worked with Marlon Perkins, we've talked about, but you've also worked with Barry Commoner. You've worked with the South African government, Operation Elephant, Operation Rhino. You've been the director of several zoos. You've been the assistant director of a zoo or two. You've been the person that headed up the endangered species programs at some of these zoos. And so, you have just this really broad background, but then you kind of take this extreme turn that really does fit in with all of the education that you had up to that point, but it all has to do with the discovery of cystic fibrosis in that monkey that led you to get your third higher education degree at the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And that led you to be licensed as a physician, and you've been treating people ever since. You started 3 clinics and saw patients, all of that stuff. And so, I think it's all of that to say, I think it's interesting that, you chose this path of educating people around the world nonstop about the benefits of diet and nutrition and supplementation and various nutrients. Nobody else has done what you have done at all, and nobody else has done what you have done at all, or for nearly as long as you have done it. I mean, going back to the beginning, when you started lecturing about nutrients and nutrition and diet, nobody else was doing that. It was not a popular topic. And, I remember, growing up around you and people you knew that were medical doctors that were speaking out about the benefits of nutrients and supplements, even folic acid, for goodness sakes, educating the public on the benefits of these life-saving nutrients. And they were having their licenses threatened and even in some cases revoked, on the medical professional side. So with that sort of monologue, I guess, what I want to talk about is what's been your driving passion to do all of these things nonstop, non-deviating, just, talk about laser focused. I mean, you've been doing this with this level of gusto and passion for 50 years, 60 years.
Longer than that.
So.
But thank you for the kind introduction. Very few people could have given that introduction. Thank you very much. And of course, I did in 1958, graduated high school, went to University of Missouri, had to take a 4-year course in the military. It was obligatory. Fort Leonard Wood, artillery, if you left that one out, it was equivalent to a Bachelor of Science degree in military sciences. Got into agricultural school, and I was going to become a scientific farmer and go back and be a scientific farmer, and ran into William Albrecht, and he showed me that, and I was working for him because I was making money because we didn't have a lot of money, so I had to get these little part-time jobs, and so I was working with Dr. Albrecht as a working student, and he would always share things. And the thing that I learned was that from him was most important was that essential nutrients do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. They occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ice cream. They occur in veins like gold and silver. They occur in veins like coal and stuff like that. And so in animals where we didn't have health insurance, the way that a farmer could save a lot of money and prevent his animals from getting sick and dying and costing him a lot of money was to give them supplements. And I thought, well, gosh, that's what I kind of learned when I was 9 years old, because of this, eye thing and everything. And I was able to cure it in 3 days when 20 doctors couldn't cure it in 5 years, just by eating animal food in 3 days. And so I was learning that stuff, and my major was in animal husbandry and nutrition. My minor was in field crops and soils. I was just going to go back and be a scientific farmer. And 2 years into that, my roommate, and I was wrestling also for the University of Missouri, 120-pound wrestling. And I was very strong, my upper body throwing bales of hay. And so I was wrestling for the University of Missouri. I had wrestled in junior high and high school. And my roommate, they had all the athletes at the university in dormitories for athletes, so they wouldn't get in trouble with all the non-athletes. Richard Montre was his name, and he was going to apply for veterinary school. And he said, why don't you come with me and apply for veterinary school? Take the test. I said, well, I didn't come here for that, and I don't have a lot of time. He said, come on. So I did, and I aced it, and got accepted into veterinary school. So without him, I probably wouldn't have gotten into veterinary school, wouldn't have even tried, and started getting into veterinary school. But then I had to give up some of my jobs because I had more classes. And so I began to work for the pathology department with Dr. Lauren Kintner, who was the top pathologist there at the University of Missouri School of Veterinary Medicine. And in 1961, it was Christmas, it was wintertime, and everybody else took off, and they left me, the new guy on the block, to stay there and do the autopsies. And I was presented with 50 dead bodies of 6-month-old sheep that were ready to go to market. They had 2 inches of wool. They were beautiful. It was Christmas time, 1961. In the center of Missouri at that time of year, it's not unusual to have temperatures of 55, 65. It'd be 55, 65, 60. And the night they all died, the 500 of them died in one night. It was 19 degrees and they all died of hypothermia. Well, nobody else figured that out, but I figured it out. And they all had goiter, which allowed them to die of hypothermia because they couldn't control their body temperatures. And all 50 of them had goiter. All 500 of them had the hemoglobin, methemoglobin, which looked like chocolate milk because the nitrates from the fertilizer was dripping into their water supply, set them up for this 19 degrees to wipe them all out. And I figured it out and got it ready for publication. And Dr. Kintner came back from Christmas. I said, well, here, can I be a co-author on this thing? He said, well, you figured it out. It's all yours. So it was my first scientific publication, 1961, was the death of these 500 lambs where they're ready to go to market. I mean, they were perfect, except that they had goiter and the temperature dropped. And I was so excited. I'm only 21 years old. I'm giving copies of this paper. It was in 2 different scientific journals. And given to everybody. I gave one to Marlon Perkins from the old Mutual Volcano show because I had worked for him for summers between school. And he recognized the importance of that paper far more than I did. I'm only 21 years old and I'm excited because I just wrote a paper. Well, he got a $25 million grant using that paper from the National Institutes of Health to study pollutants and deaths in zoo animals in the big cities and people who lived within 10-mile radius of the zoos. That was the beginning of my first human autopsies. And my goal was to find pollutants that were killing zoo animals and killing people who live near the zoos. We're going to use the zoo animals as an early warning signal like the old coal miners used to use canaries down in the coal mines. And when the animals in the zoo started to die, you knew to evacuate the city. That was the whole purpose. Make a long story short, over a 10-year period, I had done 20,000 autopsies there, 17,000 some change, over 454 species of zoo animals and 3,000 humans, and found there were no genetically transmitted diseases, there were no genetically transmitted birth defects, and that became the basis of the new science, epigenetics, which has replaced genetics, okay? And there are no genetically transmitted birth defects, there are no genetically transmitted diseases. What? Well, I don't care what your doctor says, there just are none, okay? And that's why my thesis for my postdoctoral fellowship, which is in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure, okay, because I'm the one that figured out there's no genetically transmitted diseases. And it's all due to nutritional deficiencies. Well, and to make a long story short again, I was working after that 10-year period at the medical school in Atlanta, Georgia, Emory University. And I was also working, as you pointed out, with the Yerkes Primate Center with NASA, their primate colony, and ran into the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis. I sent copies of that, of the slides, of the tissues, to experts in the world on cystic fibrosis. I didn't tell them it was from a monkey. I just said, I think this is cystic fibrosis. What do you think? They sent back in their letterhead, these are the specific perfect examples of cystic fibrosis. These are all the experts in the sense. Then I told them that it was from a monkey. Oh, that's great. Now we can get a colony going and we have a study animal, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, it's better than that. This was caused by nutritional deficiency and they fired me. They said, Wallach, you can't say that. And I was in the newspaper every day, in every newspaper in the world, every day for 3 months because I found the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis. Well, when they fired me, I was in every newspaper in the world every day for 3 months because they fired me after that. And so that's when I went back to school, make a long story short, and became a naturopathic physician. So I could treat people because I knew they weren't going to do a good job. And it was very, very obvious, you know, when you look at advertisements on TV for vitamins and minerals, they say complete nutrition, 27 nutrients. Well, there's 90 essential nutrients, and they don't even have a third of the nutrients in there. And they're saying there's complete nutrition in these nutritional formulas. And so it's very, very scary. And even right now with this Kawasaki disease, 99% of the people who get it are kids under the age of 5. Well, there's a clue. Okay, if they live past five years of age, it all goes away. There's a clue. Okay, just like 98% of the people who die of COVID-19 have one or more of these pre-existing conditions. There's a clue. Okay, and so I'm trained to identify these clues and chase them down and figure out what's going on here. Well, it turns out that Kawasaki disease is due to a deficiency of a single nutrient. Now, there could be other 4 or 5 other nutrients you're deficient in, so there's a little bit of variation there. And then you throw in the flu, COVID, all these other things. But Kawasaki disease was actually identified in Africa in kids many years before Dr. Kawasaki found it, and they named it after him, okay, in a medical school in Japan. And so it's one of those things where when you track back and track back and track back, and of course there's like every species of animals has that deficiency, gets all the same symptoms, including panarteritis, which means every artery in the body gets inflamed. They get aneurysms, which they die from. Well, there's the clue right there. Okay, which nutrient is missing when you have Kawasaki disease. And but if you can reach H5, everything changes. Well, what changes when you're at H5? You go to school and you're eating a wider range of food than you are when you're a baby and you're just getting baby food at home. Okay, and so it's just dramatic changes here. Well, it turns out that all these genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy are caused by nutritional deficiencies. Sudden-death syndrome is caused by a nutritional deficiency because the baby formulas that were made during the Second World War only had 3 minerals in there, none of which are the one that's missing when you get sudden-death syndrome. And only 2% of the babies, when you actually looked at the pathology and reports, only 2% of the babies that died of sudden-death syndrome were in bed with their mothers when they died. The rest of them were in cribs. When you redo the autopsies, they did not suffocate. They died of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart disease, a disease in which I've done 1,700 autopsies on kids under the age of 10, published in 3 languages. And so these are the sort of things that when you have that background and you have the training, you can recognize the signal right away when somebody has none of that training. They throw up their hands and say it's got to be genetic. Just like for 2,000 years, doctors knew for a fact that plagues and pandemics were caused by evil spirits. And that's why they got leeches to suck the evil spirits out of you for 2,000 years. And so I was very, very excited about this. And it was very obvious that everybody's marching in the wrong direction. And so I began to actually put together really weird stuff to make things. And I was actually treating people as a student in veterinary school with diseases with these little formulas I put together. And it was an amazing thing that I could reverse diseases that were said to be genetic in this family for 5 generations. And I give them these little things that I'm making out of stuff, peels from the garbage cans and things like that, to give them these nutrients, and their diseases would go away. And so I'm learning all this stuff, and it became very obvious that somebody needed to do something here because this was being missed very badly and people were dying unnecessarily. And we could do some great things for our communities, our churches, America, and the world. And so this is the whole beginning of the science of naturopathic medicine for me. I'm licensed since 1982 in Oregon and California. And so it's been 38 plus 20 is 58 years. I've been doing this as a licensed physician, okay, 48 years. And so it's very, very exciting. And of course, I was doing it long before that as a veterinarian. And it's one of my things when I introduce myself, I treat people like dogs, but they get better. This is because I'm giving them all the nutrients that we would give animals because we didn't have health insurance for the animals. Well, this is not difficult. It's all backed up by science. And I have a new book coming out here. It's called It's All in Your Head. And this was another area of major, major disruption in the medical industry. There's all these diseases, said to be genetic and autoimmune. There's 25 of them, including loss of your sense of smell. Oh, that's part of the COVID-19, the loss of your sense of smell. Well, the people who die of COVID-19 are mostly over age 70, and they all have osteoporosis of the skull. So that's why you see that loss of the sense of smell with COVID. COVID doesn't cause that. It's osteoporosis of the skull causing it concurrently, okay? Same thing with a blurry vision that gets worse and worse and worse. And they don't have glaucoma. They don't have cataracts. They don't have macular degeneration. So why are they losing their vision? The doctor will say, well, you may have had a stroke or something. No, they have ONA, optic nerve atrophy, which is caused by the skull squeezing the optic nerve, which is cranial nerve number 2. And then I'll jump to one that people know about is trigeminal neuralgia. You get pain in your face and you salivate a lot. That's the 5th cranial nerve being squeezed by your skull when you have osteoporosis. I'll jump to the 7th cranial nerve, the facial nerve. People know about that one is Bell's palsy. Usually it's one side of the face will droop. And when you get that 7th cranial nerve squeezed when you have osteoporosis. And then there's 2 major nerves in cranial nerve number 8. The auditory branch of the 8th cranial nerve, when that gets squeezed, you're slowly losing your hearing. But you also get tinnitus ringing in the ears. And I always ask people that when they're over age 30, do you have any tinnitus? Yeah, it kind of comes and goes. You're already getting osteoporosis of the skull. Do you have any dental problems? Oh yeah, I have all dentures and implants and everything. I've lost all my teeth a long time ago. Well, that's because you had osteoporosis of the skull. When kids have to go to an orthodontist because their teeth are all bunching up, they have osteoporosis of the skull when they're 12, 14 years old. It's not an age thing, it's a nutritional deficiency thing. Okay. And then when you have vestibular branch of the 8th cranial nerve being squeezed, you get what used to be called Meniere's disease or vertigo. So I renamed it Wallach's vertigo because they're saying it's an autoimmune disease. And so I can't let them go for the next 5,000 years calling it an autoimmune disease. It's really a nutritional deficiency disease of the skull, osteoporosis of the skull. So we call it Wallach's vertigo. We call it Wallach's vertigo. Okay. And people say, well, you're kind of arrogant, naming it after yourself. Well, I did that because I'm not going to be here forever. And I don't want people to think that Meniere's disease is an autoimmune disease like they're saying in the textbooks for medical doctors and medical students. They'll say that for the next 10,000 years if I don't say something. Okay. Very simple. And then the 10th cranial nerve is one of my favorite ones. It's the vagus nerve. It's the longest cranial nerve. It goes from the base of your skull all the way down to your tailbone. And when it gets squeezed, you get the hiccups. The branch of the 8th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, it's called the recurrent nerve, gets squeezed, controls your diaphragm, you get the hiccups. I ask people, do you get the hiccup? Oh, every morning for 10 minutes, I can't even go anyplace because I got the hiccups. Okay, can't even brush my teeth because I got the hiccups. Okay, you already have osteoporosis of the skull, squeezing that recurrent branch of the 8th cranial nerve. And then there's people who have tachycardia, fast heart rate. It could be due to that 8th cranial nerve being squeezed because it controls the rate and rhythm of the heart. It could be because they shrunk an inch and the disc between their vertebrae allow the vertebrae to get closer together. And the first 4 spinal nerves coming out of the spinal cord in a human control the rate and rhythm of the heart. Okay, so it could be both or one or the other causing the tachycardia or atrial fibrillation. Elijah Cummings, the 20 plus years guy from Baltimore, Maryland, who was he was in Congress. He was a member of Congress. He wasn't a senator. He was a congressman for over 20 years in Baltimore, Maryland, kind of an overweight black fella. And he had atrial fibrillation. They put him on a surgery table, anesthetized him, and cut his chest open, took a soldering iron, were trying to kill the part of his heart that was running amok and giving him bad chemical signals. And they killed him on the table. They killed this congressman, Elijah Cummings. Okay. And all they had to do was get him on the 90 cents nutrients with a special effort for getting rid of the osteoporosis of the skull, some MSM and vitamin D3 and glucogel thrown in with Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. And I can rebuild the skull, and that'll all go away without the risk of surgery and trying to kill parts of your heart with a soldering iron that's heated up. It's crazy. And then another one, you get COPD. It's a non-productive cough because your lungs are also controlled by that 8th cranial nerve, or excuse me, the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. And so you get a dry cough. And you can also get what's called gastroparesis. I mean, tremendous belly pain, tremendous pain. And they will put that endoscopic thing down your throat and your stomach and look around for ulcers and risk your life. And they will want to take parts of your stomach out and cut nerves and everything to try and relieve the pain, when it's really just osteoporosis of the skull. And then there's Erb's palsy. Erb's palsy is where the skull is squeezing the spinal cord as it exits the foramen magnum, that big hole in the back of the skull. Even doctors think that your spinal cord only occurs in your back. No, it's formed in your skull. Your brain forms a spinal cord, comes out of the back of the skull. And it used to be called Erb's palsy. And the guy who discovered it a long, long time ago said it was an autoimmune thing or a genetic thing, one or the other or both. And so I had to call it Erb's / Wallach's palsy because otherwise for the next 100 years or 5,000 years or whatever, they'd still think it's genetic when it's really just osteoporosis of the skull. So that's why I did those things, not out of arrogance, but to make sure that people knew that this was something they could handle without spending $50,000 in surgery and risk and everything from a neurosurgeon kind of thing. And people will just be blown away at what they can do themselves with the 90 essential nutrients, getting rid of the bad foods, maximize absorption. You are not what you eat. Even if you're supplementing with everything properly, if you're not absorbing it, it doesn't mean anything. So you got to get rid of the bad stuff so you can maximize absorption. And this is why we have these pre-existing conditions with the COVID thing. And the most important one, the medical system is left out. They start with high blood pressure. Okay, and really the one they should start out with is osteoporosis. Okay, and so I'm calling it Wallach's fibrous dysplasia, because the bone marrow cavity gets filled up with scar tissue, squeezes out the platelets, so you start bleeding, and bleeding is a big cause of death with COVID-19. And then it squeezes out the cells that make red blood cells, so you're anemic, squeezes out the cells that make the white blood cells, so you can't go after and kill and eat the COVID virus. It kills the stem cells that make antibodies. So when you have osteoporosis of the skull, and it's been going on for 30, 40, 50 years, and gets to that point when you're 70 years old and all these things are happening, you say, well, I've been eating oats for breakfast every morning, and I eat whole wheat bread all day, and I eat spaghetti every night. I've been doing it for 50, 60, 70 years, never had a problem. Why am I now having problems? Well, because now you have lost 85 to 90% of your absorption. It's not an on-off switch. It's a slow nibbling away at your intestines. And if you don't get rid of all these bad stuff, you will be very, very susceptible to dying from the COVID or dying from something else. And so you're going to die anyway because of your problem. And so one of these things are going to knock you off because you're very susceptible, because you cannot consume or absorb the things that are necessary to save you, maintain you, and protect you.
So I think that's why biology and biological science, one, is exciting, but on the other hand, it's hard to understand. It's hard for people to understand because you might need a generation of study to prove or disprove a point.
Yes.
And so, it's a blind spot for medical science. It was uninteresting. It was slow to produce results, they thought. But this is what is so exciting about the field of epigenetics, because it opens up all those possibilities, which are ultimately realities or reveal realities. Whereas people, when you were looking at the complex, they were looking at the simplistic of bacteria and genetics and things like that.
That's all they knew.
We were looking beyond that.
Yeah, that's all they knew. And so every nutrient, when you're deficient in it, whether you're low or completely, absolutely zero, you get anywhere from 1 to 15 different diseases just from that one deficiency. And, even things like congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is caused by deficiency of a single nutrient. It's the terminal event of beriberi, which used to kill sailors 300 years ago, along with scurvy. Everybody kind of knew scurvy because of the limeys. The British would eat limes and they could prevent scurvy. And so that kind of got the headlines. But at the same time, people were dying of beriberi, which is a deficiency of that one nutrient. And the terminal event was congestive heart failure. Also, pellagra was another one that they died at the same time. It was a deficiency of a single vitamin. And there's 12 different dementias, but doctors only treat Alzheimer's disease because Alzheimer's disease pays the most in the pay files of all the insurance companies. And so they disregard the other 11 dementias, even though they're treating it. They call it Alzheimer's disease so they can get the higher fees. Okay, so I always treat for all 12. And I've had people who, Steve, were in comas for 8 years with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. I gave them all these nutrients, including eggs and things, plus the 90 essential nutrients with special efforts on these nutrients that prevent, reverse these memory issues. And 3 days feeding them through their G-tube. Remember, this guy was in a coma for 8 years in a nursing home. I fed him through the G-tube. 3 days he gets up, gets dressed, shaves, goes back to work at the bank. His name was Ray McGregor from North Carolina, from Charlotte, North Carolina. he thought he was only asleep one night, and he went back to work, and nobody there knew him because he hadn't been there in 8 years and everybody else had changed. And so they said, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, this is my desk. I'm the vice president of this bank. We've been here for 8 years. We don't know you. Get out of here." And they called the police. They thought he was trying to a clever way to rob the bank or something. And these are the sort of things we do all the time just with nutrients. We take people who've been getting on dialysis, Steve, 6 days a week because they haven't urinated in 10 years. And in 2 weeks' time, they're down to 3 days of dialysis because now they're urinating. And 2 more weeks, they're off of dialysis that they've been on for 25 years. Because when you have kidney failure, there's nothing wrong with your kidney 99% of the time. It's always a artery problem. Kidneys fail because they don't get the dirty blood to filter because the arteries are blocked. And so I just learned how to unblock the arteries. Okay. Change the diet, give a couple of supplements that actually help speed up the healing.
So I mean, and again, I always have to remind people what you're talking about is nutritional deficiencies.
Yes.
These really ultimately are classic nutritional deficiencies that respond to nutrients.
That's
correct. When you're starving a biological system, whether it's a human body or a reef, as we've talked about, or a river system or a rainforest, it's starving for nutrients.
Yeah, that's why I was last year the featured speaker at the Tesla Institute in Albuquerque. I'm going to be the featured speaker this year, whether it's by Zoom or live. And in August of this year, I'm supposed to be the featured speaker because I know the cause of the carbon dioxide going up, the death of the oceans, the death of the reefs. It has nothing to do with fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are innocent. Okay, it's not fossil fuels that are causing a problem. It's actually electricity is the problem. What? It's electricity because of all the hydroelectric dams. There's 1 million hydroelectric dams damming up all the rivers, which cut out the food supply to the ocean and the reefs, which was the silt coming down, the minerals to feed the polyps that built the reefs.
Well, obviously, it's the damn dams.
It's the damn dams. That's the title of my presentation, the damn dams. And so that's why I'm the featured speaker at Tesla. I mean, who would have thought that a dumb farm boy from Missouri would be a featured speaker at a Tesla event? Okay.
Well, you're an Eagle Scout.
That's correct.
And many other people that I highly respect are Eagle Scouts. And a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, retired now. But I am incredibly impressed because you remember Fort Leonard Wood, because I also stayed there with the scout group for a weekend. But so I completely forgot about Fort Leonard Wood.
It's the Artillery Training Center.
The name, but I am so impressed that you pulled that out from, gosh, must be 70, 60 years ago for you.
Oh, longer than that. That was 1958. Okay, 1958. I went there for 4 years, every weekend and 1 month every summer. Okay, got the equivalent of a Bachelor of Science degree in military science. Okay, on tactics and artillery. I know more about the.
Well, and your MOS in the military was primarily, you were a doctor in the military, and your emphasis was on nuclear care, right? So it's keeping the troops safe ultimately. And
I got into the Air Force, Steve, when I was in the Army.
Well, ROTC was different. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. When I was in the Army for 7 years, it was all the artillery. Okay. And I was learning how to hit targets, 3 miles away, that kind of stuff.
Well, I've seen you read a map and use compasses and all that stuff. You're very proficient at all of that, also. So it still begs the question, though. What we started this talk on is, why are you so passionate about this? You can see the gleam in your eye, or the gleam in your eye when you get excited about, chasing down a puzzle, or collecting these clues and coming to hypotheses and theories and conclusions. But what drives you to continue doing this? Everybody that knows you, anybody that has spent any time with you, all comes to the same conclusion that nobody can keep up with you. And I think that comes from not just your boundless energy at 80 years old, because you've always been this way that I can remember, but it's that you're really passionate and driven And the way I see it, to help people, because you don't do it for the money, you do it to help people. I mean, you get, you know, I don't want to say joy, but you get the reward by helping people with you know, their questions and educating them and seeing the positive results in their lives.
Yeah,
You've been this way as far back as I can remember. I mean, I remember you doing this same sort of thing around helping cystic fibrosis patients.
Yes.
You never charged a dime.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it just, you've been this way all along.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is, if the answer is so simple, just like doctors knew that pandemics and the plagues were caused by evil spirits for 2,000 years, and they got leeches to suck the evil spirits out of them, I believe that we're doing the same thing today.
Does that work? Should we all go get leeches?
No, but it did it for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Today, according to Johns Hopkins, the number 3 killer of Americans is medical mistakes in hospitals. Each year, medical doctors kill 251,000 of their customers in their workplace from simple mistakes. That's not me, it's Johns Hopkins. Every 4 years, they kill 1 million of their customers in their workplace from simple mistakes. They don't even get a parking ticket, for God's sakes. And so if I can save one person by giving them the information, just like this Kawasaki disease thing, when they're making a big deal out of this and how it's associated with the COVID virus, it took me 4 minutes to figure it all out. I just asked Siri all the right questions, and Siri came up with all the autopsies and all of the various textbooks and all of the various scientific papers were written to answer the question that I asked. Siri's very smart. It's an amazing thing. I can redo all this.
Yeah, technology is incredible. So we're gonna wind this up in about 5 minutes, and I want to end with something completely different. And so, you know, you've had the amazing ability to work with people, you know, from all walks of life, politicians and doctors and professors and people
African tribesmen.
I mean, people from all over the place of all walks of life. But one of the people that is probably one of the most unique characters you have worked with that I can recall, and I didn't know him personally, but I've gotten to know a lot about him, and that was Arthur Jones. And so Arthur Jones, you know, you can tell the story better, so I'm going to let you tell it. But you know, from my perspective, this guy was like Howard Hughes. He was very much like Howard Hughes, and he where you met him, I believe, was he was in Africa doing documentaries using movie cameras, you know, like you see in the old John Wayne movies, movie cameras with the film and the 8mm or 35mm, whatever it was.
35mm.
Real movie film and movie cameras, and you know, on booms on trucks and things, and chasing rhinos and elephants in this particular instance. And so we're fortunate to have now video. It was movie film before, transferred to video, now digitized, of you tranquilizing rhino in Africa in probably 1964, I would say. And it's narrated by Arthur Jones. And you know, I tell people about Arthur Jones when I give a tour here at the Youngevity offices. But Arthur Jones, most people actually know of him sort of, because he was the inventor of the Nautilus weightlifting equipment, the exercise equipment also, which was after you got to know him. And he also, as I recall, had like a several hundred acre, I don't know, you probably know, but 1,000 acre, 500 acre, I don't know, several hundred acre ranch in Florida after that time period where he had all these exotic animals, kind of like a wild animal safari park of his own private wild animal park. And but he used to fly baby elephants from Africa to save them and bring them back to the U.S. And I mean, just a crazy kind of individual, but I think he was a kind of a lifelong friend of yours. Yes. And so I just want to wrap up with maybe a story about meeting Arthur Jones and what that kind of led to.
Yeah, and of course, at that time, I was in Natal, Republic of South Africa, at the Umfolozi and Shoshului game reserves, saving the white rhino. There was only 470 left at that time of the southern white race. So there's probably about the same amount of the northern race above Central Africa in northern Africa. But I could only do one, so we were trying to save the southern race. And he was there filming that as a documentary for TV and making movies and all that kind of stuff. And he was just fascinated that it only took a couple of milligrams of this drug. It was 50,000 times more potent than morphine. It was called M99. They didn't even have a name for it. They just called it M99. It was a 99 extract. It was the 99th extract of morphine. And I could put it into a dart and tranquilize, maybe with 2 milligrams, to tranquilize a 6,000-pound white rhino. And then I would give them nalorphine or nalone in their ear vein, and we'd have a rope around their head through this box. I'd give them the antidote. They'd pop up, and they had people pull them into the box. We'd close the door behind them and ship them to America. Okay, well, today we have 25,000 members of the white rhino, southern race of white rhino, in the world. And of course, we started wild game parks there in Africa at the same time. And so between the game parks and the wild animal parks here in the zoos, in the United States, we have 25,000 members of the southern race of the white rhino left, okay, which we've actually saved them. There's only 3 of the northern race left. So we're going to have to
and
take
this is all conservation
yes,
of
conservation.
the white rhino and African elephants. And, I've seen, we have some on the wall here, but, I've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of slides that were primarily photographs you took in Africa of this whole process. And some of these elephants.
I caught over 200 of the white rhino and shipped them here. I caught 100 African elephants, and we branded them with branding irons that were like 2 feet high, and we paint with marine epoxy on them, the numbers. I have some pictures of these elephants being pulled down. They've got the numbers on their rumps and their necks and their ears and so forth.
And you also protected them. I mean, you were officially a game ranger. I mean, you protected them.
Yeah, for 2 years.
You protected them from poachers.
That's right. And we started game parks, and we taught the rangers. And that's why we have 25,000 members of the southern race of the white rhinos. 25,000. Back then, it was only 470. And today, there's only 3 members of the northern race because there was nobody doing what we did in the south. There was nobody doing what we did then in the north. And so we're going to have to repopulate the north if they really want to do that and can guarantee protection and so forth. There's no sense to keep
the northern and southern white rhino are essentially the same animal, but separated by geography, I think.
That is
You're
correct.
the expert, not me, but that's my understanding.
No, that's correct. It's separated by geography. There are a little bit different in shape and size because of the difference in nutrition in the soil in the north and the south. The southern race is a little bit bigger. And you can tell if you see 2 of them at the same together, you say, oh, the bigger one, that's the southern race. Okay, because of the difference in nutrition. But in a game park and you feed them the same thing, they're going to look alike because they're getting the same nutrients.
Now, when you were in South Africa,
yes,
you were probably still like 120, 125, 130 pounds. I mean, in this
I was
video,
125 pounds.
In this video, it's quite apparent. You're 10 yards away, 10 feet away, maybe from a 6,000-pound wild white rhino, and I mean you're tiny by comparison. And but you also tranquilized and transferred to game parks and game preserves. I mean, some of these elephants, these bull elephants, were what, 20,000 pounds?
Well, at least 15,000. They were
15,
big boys. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, again, it lived in the bush for 2 years and had to learn how.
And
to
you accessed these places how?
Access
these places out in the middle of nowhere how?
We're on horseback.
Now you see, they're continuing this work of, protecting the white rhino, but they're using helicopters. They cheat.
Yeah, we did everything from horseback. We didn't have airplanes and helicopters and all that kind of stuff. We did everything from horseback or walking. And I had to learn how to speak Zulu and Matabele in Southwest Africa and also South Africa. And I became fluent in Zulu and Matabele. And these people were just wonderful. They accepted me into their villages. And that's when I began to really treat humans because I knew a little bit about medicine and health. And these kids were coming and they had all these nutritional deficiencies because they're just eating corn or something, just like that. Nothing else but corn. And so we give them all these nutrients and solve all their problems. And of course, the members of the tribes, they just treated us like heroes because we're saving their kids and showing them simple ways to deal with it. And so that's where I really, really understood how important that nutrition was, because you live in a pristine place like out in the middle of Africa. You think they're going to get everything they need, but you cannot get everything you need just by eating well. That would be like saying, oh, just put dirt from Texas into your car. There's bound to be some oil in there. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there is bound to be some, but it's not enough. So, okay. So thank you for that. We're going to wrap this up because we don't want to go too long. We'll save some more for later. So thank you so much for your time today. And thank you for all you do, of course. And we will talk to everybody soon. Everybody stay safe and stay well, and talk to everybody soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Humbagashle. Go in peace in Zulu.